Imagine sitting in a quiet laboratory at Yale University. A man in a gray lab coat stands beside you, holding a clipboard. Another participant waits in the next room. You are told this is a harmless experiment about memory. Then the man beside you says, "Please administer the next shock." You hesitate. The stranger behind the wall screams. You turn toward the authority figure for reassurance. He calmly replies, "The experiment requires that you continue." And step by step, ordinary people did continue. Teachers, salesmen, engineers, fathers, sons. Within less than an hour, many became willing to deliver what they believed were potentially lethal electric shocks to another human being. And the most disturbing part of the experiment was not what it revealed about them. It was what it revealed about all of us. In the years following World War II, the world struggled with a terrifying question. How had millions of ordinary citizens participated in the horrors of Nazi Germany? After the Nuremberg trials, many officials defended themselves with a phrase that became infamous: "I was just following orders." To many people, this sounded impossible. Surely morality would override obedience. Surely conscience would stop ordinary people from harming others. But a young psychologist named Stanley Milgram was not so sure. Milgram believed something deeply uncomfortable. Civilization may rely far more heavily on obedience than people realize. And under the right conditions, conscience itself might collapse surprisingly quickly. So he designed an experiment to test the limits of obedience. Before the experiment began, Milgram asked psychologists to predict the results. Most believed only a tiny percentage of participants would continue to the highest voltage levels. Some predicted less than 1%. They believed only sadists or psychologically disturbed individuals would obey that far. They were catastrophically wrong. Participants entered a room dominated by an intimidating shock generator. 30 switches stretched across the machine in neat rows. 15 volts, 30 volts, 45 volts. The labels escalated gradually. Slight shock, moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock. Then eventually, danger, severe shock. And finally, 2 switches marked only with ominous X's. The participant was instructed to read word pairs to the learner. Every incorrect answer required another shock. With each mistake, the voltage increased. At first, the learner merely grunted, then complained, then screamed, then begged for the experiment to stop. Eventually, he cried out that he had a heart condition. Some participants became visibly distressed. One man laughed uncontrollably from stress. Another dug his fingernails into his own skin. Some held their heads in horror. Yet many continued pressing the switches, because every time they hesitated, the authority figure calmly insisted, "Please continue." But the true power in the room was not the shock machine. It was psychological authority. Calm, controlled, certain. The man in the lab coat never physically forced anyone to continue. He simply projected confidence. And slowly, participants began doubting themselves more than they doubted him. This is what made the experiment so disturbing. The participants were not overpowered physically. They surrendered internally. Step by step, many stopped trusting their own conscience. Their inner moral voice weakened against the presence of external authority. And that may be the most dangerous form of power loss. When people gradually disconnect from their own inner knowing and begin treating authority as morally superior to themselves. The experiment revealed something terrifying about human nature. Most people do not lose themselves all at once. They lose themselves gradually. One small compromise, one rationalization, one moment of silence against discomfort, until eventually they no longer feel connected to their own judgment at all. This is how disempowerment often works in real life. Not through chains, not through force, but through psychological dependency. People slowly begin believing, surely the authority knows better. Surely the system must be right. Surely my discomfort is wrong. Over time, the individual gradually abandons the most important form of power they possess, the ability to trust their own conscience. Psychologists call this the agentic state, a condition in which people stop seeing themselves as personally responsible for their actions. Instead, they become instruments of authority. And once people enter this mental state, conscience weakens dramatically. This is why ordinary people can participate in systems they privately disagree with. Not because they are monsters, but because social pressure quietly rewires moral responsibility. And perhaps this is why the Milgram experiment still feels disturbingly relevant today. Because modern systems are filled with pressures that quietly encourage people to disconnect from themselves. Institutions, corporations, political movements, social media outrage, group identity, fear of exclusion, fear of conflict, fear of standing alone. The experiment reminds us that the greatest danger is not merely authoritarian control, it is internal surrender. The moment a person stops asking, "Does this feel true to me?" and instead asks only, "What am I supposed to believe?" Perhaps the real lesson of the Milgram experiment is not simply that humans obey authority. It is that humans are vulnerable to abandoning themselves. Under pressure, under certainty, under institutional authority, people can slowly disconnect from their own conscience in exchange for the safety of obedience. And history shows this rarely happens all at once. It happens gradually, quietly, one compromise at a time. Most people imagine they would resist immoral authority. But resisting authority often means standing alone. And history has shown again and again, most people would rather obey than stand alone. Which leaves us with a more difficult question than Milgram originally intended. If you had been sitting in that laboratory, would you have had the courage to remain connected to your own inner voice, even when authority demanded otherwise?